Make sure that our hybrid is all good. Awesome. Well, welcome everyone. Thanks so much for spending the afternoon with us. You are in the Accelerating Electric Transportation via Interstate Collaboration breakout session today. We're really excited for you to be here. We have an awesome group of panelists here with us. I'm really excited to hear their perspectives on the importance of collaborating to advance transportation electrification. Just a few housekeeping items. Reminder that we'll be taking questions through the Whova app. So if you have the app on your phone or you're in the app watching this virtually, go ahead and put your questions into the app. We'll have plenty of time at the end for question and answer. And so we'd love to hear what questions you have for our panelists. Today joining us, we have Katelynn Samuelsen. She is the Climate and Clean Energy Initiatives Coordinator with the Office of Sustainability and Clean Energy. And we also have Deb Erwin, who is the Director, Clean Transportation Policy and Program Planning for Xcel Energy. They are amazing and experts in transportation electrification and can give us both the government and the utility perspectives, respectively, on how we can be collaborating to put more electric vehicles on the roads in the Midwest. So with that, let's jump right into it. My name is Jane McCurry. I'm the Executive Director of Clean Fuels Michigan. I'm honored to be at my fourth Renew Summit moderating this panel. If you can believe it, it's been 4 years since we've had an electric vehicle breakout session at the summit, which is really exciting. Clean Fuels Michigan is a nonprofit trade association. We represent businesses from across the transportation landscape with the goal of creating the right business environment for those entities to thrive and to put more clean vehicles on the roads in Michigan and across the Midwest. So I'm going to just give some brief opening remarks to kind of frame up the conversation for Katelynn and Deb. My first note here, electric transportation has come a really long way. Like I said, 3 years ago, we had this session for the first time, and all we really talked about was passenger vehicles. Today, there are all shapes and sizes of vehicles that come in electric versions, from bicycles to transit buses, delivery vehicles, school buses, and everything in between. It's really, really exciting to see how quickly the industry is moving forward. And that means that there are a lot of new opportunities and new barriers that we need to be thinking about. And I think the key there and the key to our conversation today is that collaboration is really necessary to create the right environment for projects and programs to succeed and to continue to see adoption trend lines go up. So, I put a few on the slide here today. You have fleets or vehicle owners, whether it's a passenger vehicle or a transit bus. Someone has to own and operate and drive and maintain that vehicle. Someone else, the utility, has to provide the electrons for that vehicle and make sure that power is getting there in a clean, inexpensive, efficient manner. Technology providers. So we have vehicle makers, charging station makers, software providers, all of the above that provide the technology for these fleets. In addition to governments that are providing incentives, you have site hosts that can host charging stations or house vehicles. So there's dozens and dozens of stakeholders that have to come together to create a successful project when we think about transportation electrification. And so collaboration is really kind of the name of the game to get these projects off the ground. And the great news is that the Midwest is really good at this already. We have representatives from clean cities that are here that would love to talk to you about this project, I'm sure. The Michigan to Montana Alternative Fuels Corridor goes from Port Huron, Michigan, all the way down I-94 to Billings, Montana. And it's an awesome example of interstate, inter-region collaboration to put charging stations and alternative fueling stations all across this huge corridor so that folks can get where they need to go in alternative fuel and electric vehicles. Now, the big opportunity available to us today is federal infrastructure funds. It's really going to change this conversation, I think. If you were watching over the fall, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act passed and includes $128 billion in funding for clean mobility solutions. including $7.5 billion for EV charging stations, $5 billion for low and zero emission buses, and much, much more. And that provides a huge opportunity for the Midwest to come together and continue to build out corridors to make sure that trucks and buses can get everywhere they need to go across the region, and really kickstart this market and make sure that we're leading on and getting vehicles out on the road. So like I said, lots of new opportunities. The industry is moving really quickly. And it's a great opportunity just to collaborate to make sure that everyone has access to mobility solutions that are cleaner for the air that we all breathe and making the places that we live more vibrant. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Katelynn, who can tell us more about what she does and her role in this collaboration transportation electrification ecosystem. And don't forget to put your questions in the Whova app.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for taking the time to come here today. I was so excited when Jane reached out and asked me to speak today. I was actually an intern for Renew at the start of my professional career. So I'm super happy to be continuing my work transitioning Wisconsin to a clean energy economy with the state of Wisconsin. So as Jane mentioned, I work with the Wisconsin Office of Sustainability and Clean Energy, and I'll be talking a little bit about Wisconsin's interstate electric vehicle initiatives. So as I'm not sure if everyone was able to catch the opening remarks this morning, but as Lieutenant Governor Mandela Barnes mentioned, our office was created by Executive Order number 38, which outlines EVER's plans for transitioning Wisconsin to a clean energy economy. The director of our office, Maria Redmond, has used the example before of a wheel to describe the work that our office does. We kind of serve as the administrative hub, while other states and other agencies kind of serve as the spoke. So we make sure that all of the work relating to electric vehicles and clean energy is aligned in the state of Wisconsin, and that we're not stepping on each other's toes or working against each other on our initiatives. Additionally, OSCE is the lead on planning, programs, and policy development that addresses climate change and transitioning the state to a clean energy economy. A really big part of our work right now is the Clean Energy Plan, which is developing a pathway for Wisconsin to be 100% to consume 100% carbon neutral electricity by 2050. And the transportation sector is actually the second largest emitter of greenhouse gases. So electrifying transportation is a really big part of the Clean Energy Plan. In addition to developing pathways, high impact strategies towards electrification in the Clean Energy Plan, we also are working on several different electric vehicle initiatives that I'll go into more detail shortly. These include the EDA grant, the Regional Electric Vehicle Midwest Plan, as well as the Lake Michigan Circuit Project. And then there's our contact information on the screen for more information. And so before jumping into specific electric vehicle initiatives, I want to talk about some of the work we do that supports our electric vehicle initiatives. So these are consistent meetings between all of the agencies listed below, who all have work that involves electric vehicles. So these meetings help to facilitate collaboration between agencies on electric vehicle planning initiatives. And it is because of this collaboration between agencies that Wisconsin is able to respond to grant and regional collaboration opportunities efficiently and successfully. Everything related to electric vehicles is intertwined. It's super important to recognize that all of this stuff kind of works together, and it's really important that we all are acknowledging the work of other agencies and working together to make sure our actions are in alignment. And then just a note, other types of alternative fuels are part of the discussion, including the low carbon fuel standard, and then how to lower emissions in the transportation sector overall through things like public transportation and other infrastructure. Okay, so the first electric vehicle initiative in the state of Wisconsin that I want to talk about is the statewide economic development planning grant. So this was $1 million federal dollars that DOA received from the American Rescue Plan for electric vehicle planning. DOA submitted a winning proposal in collaboration with Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation and Wisconsin Department of Transportation on analysis planning to accelerate electric vehicle adoption and carbon reduction. So this work will build on the 55 recommendations presented in the Governor's Task Force on Climate Change, as well as our state lead by example initiatives, the ongoing efforts of WEDC and WISDOT, as well as our clean energy plan. Specifically, Wisconsin is planning for electric vehicle charging stations, electric vehicle manufacturing, supply chain opportunities, as well as end use demand. Currently, our work involves responding to the requirements to get the money from the ARP, and then more information will come. Our second electric vehicle initiative is the Regional Electric Vehicle Midwest Coalition, also known as REV Midwest. This was a bipartisan MOU signed by 5 governors, Illinois, Indiana, Michigan, Minnesota, and Wisconsin in September of 2021, with this objective being to create a regional framework to accelerate vehicle electrification in the Midwest, specifically medium and heavy duty fleet electrification, elevating economic growth and industry leadership, and then as well as advancing equity and clean environment. And our current work is a task force of all 5 states creating a work plan. And we use the interagency transportation team in Wisconsin to support the task force. And other states have similar working groups to ensure that all states and all agencies are in alignment. And then our last electric vehicle initiative is the Lake Michigan Circuit, which I think is a super fun one. So this is another multi-state partnership proposal like REV Midwest to build a new road trip for EV drivers, which would be a scenic route with reliable light-duty charging stations across the on the Lake Michigan coastline, with the objective being to build, maintain, and encourage the use of a robust EV tourism attraction around Lake Michigan. Currently, we are reviewing the MOU. I think Michigan has officially announced their involvement, and we are working on data collection, which is another really important part of this project. And I think we're aiming to begin construction of electric vehicle chargers on the coastline in 2022. And again, a common theme of this presentation and the panel in general is that collaboration is really important to make sure that all of our actions are aligned, that the REV Midwest MOU, that the EDA grant is supporting the work of the Lake Michigan Circuit and vice versa. And then up next, I kind of just want to highlight some, like Jane did, some upcoming federal opportunities. There's a lot of money coming towards Wisconsin for electric vehicle charging. Wisconsin is slated to receive $79 million in formula funding, so automatic funding from the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. And there's billions in competitive funding available for EVs through the IIJA Act and hopefully potentially the Build Back Better. And again, planning and collaboration, make sure that Wisconsin is able to respond to these opportunities quickly and successfully, and that everyone is able to work together to elevate each other's work. Again, thank you all so much for taking the time to come listen today. I do want to reiterate that we have public comment, options for public comment available online. I like the phrase that government works for you. So make sure that your voice is heard. Feel free to spark up a conversation with me or the director of our office, Maria Redmond. Really, either of us would be really happy to listen to your questions, hear comments, concerns, and talk about ideas. So thank you, and I'll pass it over to Deb.
Great, thank you. As Jane said, I'm Deb Erwin with Xcel Energy. I have also presented at this before on the topic of EVs, so super excited to be back and talking to you about electric transportation. So if you don't know, Xcel Energy is a utility company in Wisconsin. We serve northwestern Wisconsin. And really, electric transportation fits Xcel Energy's strategic priorities really well. So, we're focused on leading the clean energy transition, and, with transportation sector being a very large source of emissions, as the electric generation sector decarbonizes, it presents a great opportunity to bring the benefits of decarbonization to the transportation sector. The utility is in a really good role to address a lot of barriers for electric transportation adoption. We can be a source of information, we can help simplify the process for customers, and we can do things to really focus on equity and lower costs to the infrastructure that might be needed and the overall process for that transition. And overall, always aiming to keep bills low, keep rates affordable for customers. The better, the increase in load that comes with electric vehicles has the potential to better use the electric system that we have today. So that increase in load, a lot of charging overnight, for example, is using that infrastructure more efficiently, which can result in lower costs for all customers. So just a little bit more specifics about Xcel Energy and how we think about these benefits and, how they're really real and in front of us today. At this point, we have a goal to have an 80% reduction in our carbon emissions from the electric sector by 2030 and to be 100% carbon free by 2050. And so that aligns really well with the goals in the governor's task force and a lot of other stakeholders and customers. When it comes to EVs, Xcel Energy does have a specific vision that we'd like to power 1.5 million EVs in our service territory by 2030. That's going to produce $1 billion in customer fuel savings annually by 2030 with the cost of electricity instead of gas to fuel their vehicles. On average, our customers charging overnight in our service territories, it costs the equivalent of $1 or less a gallon. So that's where all of that savings is coming from. And of course, we're also reducing significantly the carbon emissions associated with that transportation. So just blow it up a little bit more. Xcel Energy serves 8 states. And so, we have been proposing and operating EV programs to support our customers across our 8 state jurisdictions, including Wisconsin, Minnesota, North Dakota, South Dakota, and the UP of Michigan. We're also doing a lot in Colorado, New Mexico, and Texas. But if you're thinking about the types of collaboration and the types of projects that, Jane and Kate talked about, we're clearly not serving the entire country, nobody is. And so it's really important to work together on an even broader scale. And so that's why recently the National Electric Highway Coalition was announced. So there had been historically several regional utility coalitions trying to, support EV charging infrastructure across broader regions. Several of those have now merged into this national initiative, which really just focuses on the power of collaboration to make sure that we're really addressing all of the gaps in public charging across the country. Now, that's clearly the same goals that are outlined in the federal infrastructure bill. So we're really excited at the opportunity to partner with customers, with communities, with technology providers, all of the folks that Jane sort of laid out there, with the government agencies that are planning and working towards the best way to use those dollars in our states. We know that electric utilities need to have adequate infrastructure, and we will be a big part of solving this problem. So there are over 50 electric companies already in this National Highway Coalition. And you'll see, if you look closely, that all of the major utilities in Wisconsin are on that list. And so, this initiative is kind of just getting started, and we're all waiting on more guidance from the federal government on how those federal funds will be used. I don't know if any of you have been doing this, but I've been working on our comments in response to the request for information that the USDOT put out. And they'll be issuing more guidance on how that money can be used by the states, how they're going to roll out some of these grant programs. And a lot of the themes of the comments of the electric utility sector, as well as Xcel Energy, has to do with early coordination, working together, making sure you're talking to your utility company, because you're not going to succeed with putting in infrastructure that you want to connect to the electric grid unless you've planned that sort of hand in hand with your utility. And so we're really excited at the opportunity to do that, and we're looking forward to it. So just one thing to highlight as an example of partnership and collaboration that Xcel Energy has been a part of in Wisconsin. We do have a couple of programs supporting EV infrastructure in Wisconsin. This charging station in northwestern Wisconsin in Washburn is a really great example of multi-party collaboration to get some infrastructure in place. Now, I want to point out, so the map here is actually a snippet of the alternative fuel corridors map. So a lot of the charging infrastructure funding in the federal infrastructure bill is directed at building out those alternative fuel corridors. And so certain, routes have been designated as corridors that, would be looking for sufficient EV charging. And so you'll notice, obviously, there's a lot more roads out there than, what are shown here. So there's a lot of work to be done. And so, this is a project that, might not be eligible for some of that federal funding, for example, because it's not along an alternative fuel corridor. But, in order to support all of the customers, all of the tourism, all of the travel in Northwestern Wisconsin, these are places that need public charging infrastructure. And so we were really excited to support this project. The partners, and, this probably is not a complete list, honestly, of all of the folks that it took to do this one project. But essentially, this resulted in a fast charger installed that is going to be available for public use. But its primary purpose, and sort of how it got started in the beginning, was that the Bay Area Rural Transit Entity had gotten a grant for electric buses. And so this is part of the charging infrastructure they will use to charge their electric buses, which was through funded again through another US DOT grant. But they wanted to make sure that not only could their buses charge using this infrastructure, but that it could also be available to the general public. And so we used our commercial EV program to support the build out of the make-ready infrastructure, to lower the cost for them to do that project, and every dollar counts when you're trying to make that project work and make sure that you're making that federal funding go as far as possible. And so, we were really excited to get this in a visible area in Bayfield County where people can use it, where it works for the transit entity. But it took a lot of planning and took a lot of time to make that, this one beautiful charger come to fruition, right? So this is the kind of thing that we're all going to have to do over and over again at a substantially scaled up, version to really start to meet the needs of what we're talking about when we're using that federal infrastructure bill funding. So I think I'll stop it there and we can take some questions.
Thanks, Deb. Thanks, Katelynn. That was great. I'm just going to flip us back to our opening slide here. Awesome. Continue to put your questions into Whova, and I have this up here so I can be monitoring them as we go through. So much good information in there. I think it would be interesting to start with a question that builds on, Deb, what you were just talking about, just the timeline, the amount of parties that are involved to get one DC fast charging station up and running. Can you give the audience a better sense of, how those locations are selected, how they're subsequently incentivized, and how long that has taken in the past? And maybe if there are ways that we could streamline that as we look toward spending all of this extra money that we have now effectively.
Yeah, great question. Is this on? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think it matters a lot. A lot of different factors matter, right? So one of the goals of the infrastructure bill in particular, and a project like the one that I highlighted, is getting sufficient charging infrastructure in rural areas and areas that are kind of really underserved from that perspective. The electric distribution infrastructure in rural areas is not necessarily prepared in every instance to add significant loads, without a lot of planning. And so, when you think about that, you need to think about, are you putting in one charger? Are you putting in a whole bunch of chargers in a single location? And so, the planning, if you know what you want to do, and you're looking to install maybe one fast charger or something like that, I would say a couple of months, maybe 3 to 4 months of planning ahead of time will work. When we're talking about something like a bank of, 5, 10, 20 chargers in a single location, like, folks may have seen with like Tesla supercharger stations and that sort of thing, that can be a megawatt to 2 megawatts of load in a specific location that, was not built for that. And so that's going to require material upgrades to the distribution system. That is a really good opportunity to use the type of programs that we've been looking at, and that, when you build out the grid like that, the customer causing that new load typically has to contribute to the build out of that grid to meet that load. The way that we approach that with our program in Wisconsin is to really take into consideration the new load that's going to be brought on, and sort of use that almost as a credit up front to reduce the cost, reduce what we would charge customers for that distribution grid build out. And so I think it's, thinking through creative solutions like that to, think about what the end goal is, and what we're trying to accomplish, so that we can remove barriers, like the costs associated with upgrades needed. And, that type of big build out, that could be a year and a half lead time, honestly, if that's, if you're trying to add a megawatt or two of load to a location that isn't ready for it. So that does require a lot of planning.
Yeah, thank you. Katelynn, I'm curious how your team is thinking through that, especially the Lake Michigan circuit. A lot of the area around Lake Michigan is very rural, but tourists and folks traveling through will still need to charge up quickly, or maybe overnight at a campsite. I'm just curious how you're thinking through those projects, what that will look like, and what sort of planning you're doing now.
A lot of data collection right now, and we are thinking about installing chargers every I think it was 30 to 50 miles to make sure that people are able to charge their cars on the road trip. I think we're working a lot with Michigan to get all the information that we need about what infrastructure already exists, what the cost of bringing electricity to the land is, and a lot of different planning with a lot of different stakeholders, and making sure that we have conversations with everyone to fully understand what the needs are of the area.
Yeah, thank you. One thing that we haven't touched on yet is equity and environmental justice, and how we make sure that all the communities in the Midwest have access to electric transportation. To me, that means not only electric cars, but bicycles or transit buses or school buses. But I'm curious how each of you in your roles are thinking about environmental justice and equity in your role in making sure that electric transportation is truly accessible for everyone.
I
can take it first. Yeah, I think it's really important that we have everyone at the table with these conversations, and that we have a lot of different stakeholder engagement, and that we're aware of the needs of local communities. I think that empowering local governments is super important when it comes to renewable energy. I think that people in the communities themselves know what the community needs, and giving local governments the tools to transition their community to a clean energy economy.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think, when it comes to some of the federal funding, which is just top of mind, I think for everybody right now, the states, in addition to the plan that was sort of already in the works, the state has a great opportunity to plan how it wants to see this infrastructure sort of addressing all of these types of equity concerns. And so I think, the state, and as you said, local governments, the closer you can get to the community, the better they will understand what the actual needs are in those communities. So I think that's really important, to not just sort of take it at a high level. Xcel Energy has been involved with a couple of projects that are specifically geared at supporting, folks who may have not as easy access to electric transportation. There's a project that we've been doing in the Twin Cities in Minnesota, where an electric car sharing nonprofit has partnered with us and the cities of St. Paul and Minneapolis to install charging infrastructure at 70 sites all across those two cities. And, that charging infrastructure can be used not only for the electric cars that are in the car share program, but also for the general public. And so, one of the objectives there is to really help folks get access to electric transportation options who might not otherwise have that, as well as access to charging infrastructure that they might not be able to have at home.
Yeah, thanks. Speaking of creative partnerships, we have some questions in the chat about ownership models. Because the industry is so new, there are a lot of different ownership models and financing models for electric vehicle charging stations. I'm curious how each of you are thinking through, who should own and operate and maintain these stations. Maybe it depends on the location. Just curious how you're thinking through that too.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of different companies that are building out EV charging infrastructure. Some of them are focused on owning it and others are not. I think the amount of infrastructure that is needed, this is like an all hands on deck situation. I don't think there's one model to address that. I think that probably all of the models are needed. With that said, I think as an electric utility, we are very happy to support our customers' needs by offering charging infrastructure that we would own. Not all customers want to own it or have to deal with it themselves. And they may want to work with the electric provider directly, just because then that's kind of one less entity that they have to deal with. And so, we want to make it easy for our customers. And so that's, what a lot of our programs and initiatives do is offer charging infrastructure that's owned by the electric utility, but that's certainly not to the exclusion of other options.
I want to emphasize what Deb said with all hands on deck. I think that's really important. I don't think for any of our projects, we're looking at any one entity for exclusively owning all of the chargers. We've been meeting with companies to hear about their infrastructure and their ideas for installing electric chargers. So I think it's going to be kind of a combination of everything.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. There are also a few questions on the theme of how do we get involved? How do we become part of the planning process? How do we know when projects are happening? Katelynn, maybe you want to take this one first and talk about how folks can get involved in your planning process and support your office.
Yeah, of course. So we are always accepting public comment online. Feel free to email directly. The Clean Energy Plan, which will be coming out soon within the next few months, is what the director often calls a living document. So this isn't going to be like the final release of the plan. We had multiple stakeholder engagement events and listening sessions to inform this publication of the plan. And we're going to keep our ears open for future publications, so to make sure that everyone's thoughts and feedback is incorporated, and that once it's published, it's not just kind of left there, that it's constantly being updated and new things are added depending on what people want. So I would really encourage people to email me, to email the director, to submit written comment online, give us a call, set up a meeting. We're happy to do any of that.
Thank you. Deb, did you want to add anything on how to get involved?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to, if you have a project, I would say contact your utility, or your co-op or whoever the electric provider is, and I think we want to work with you. We want to make your project work. We want to help you understand, what things are necessary to do it on the timeline that you're looking for. So we don't want to be a barrier. We have really great information on our website, so definitely check that out as well. But yeah, you can definitely reach out to your utility anytime.
Thanks. I'm also curious, Katelynn, maybe you covered this earlier, but in your planning grant, are you looking just at charging stations, or are you looking at like the whole supply chain? I mean, someone has to manufacture charging stations and manufacture vehicles and build software. Is that part of that planning? What that workforce looks like in Wisconsin?
All of it is part of the planning initiative. So everything from electric chargers to infrastructure to supply chain management to end use demand, it's all going to be covered in the planning grant. So that's what we're working on now.
Great. That'll be super interesting. So like I said, I represent an organization in Michigan, And in Michigan, over 20% of our workforce is employed in the mobility industry. So it's hugely important to be thinking about, who's building these vehicles, how are jobs changing, who needs to be retrained, what communities may be at risk to lose an employer. So it's really interesting. And there's so many new jobs in the mobility industry now that weren't there 10 years ago, because we just need all different kinds of technology to support these vehicles. We also have lots of additional questions about the infrastructure bill funding. Do either of you want to jump into just kind of high level, how you think that funding is going to be doled out, who's eligible for funding? And maybe each of you can talk about, the piece of that you're most excited about.
Yeah, so I said in the presentation, 79 million in formula funding, which means kind of automatic funding from the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, and then potentially billions in competitive funding. So this is where the collaboration is really important, and that all our agencies are working together so we can respond in alignment to the grants successfully and efficiently. And I am excited for all of the new opportunities that the money is going to bring, and for all of the opportunities to expand charging infrastructure and electrify the transportation.
Yeah, I think a lot of the direct eligibility for that funding, like it will be going directly to the state, right? As you said, through that formula funding. There is, for folks who haven't looked at it, that funding can fund up to 80% of a project's cost, and then there's a 20% cost match required. And so that's just another way that it's pretty clear that some partnerships and other entities may need to be involved in any of those projects to kind of bring that cost match and when work together. Same for the competitive grant side of things, that $2.5 billion that will be available for everybody to kind of compete for. I think primarily those grant applicants will be governmental type entities, tribes, that sort of thing. But also they'll be looking to make sure that those entities have partnered with private entities to build the infrastructure that they're looking to get funding for. Yeah, what am I excited for? I mean, all of it. My gosh.
Me too. It's a huge opportunity. Yeah. So, high level, there's formula funds. That means there's a formula that says each state automatically gets a certain percentage of these funds, and they're mostly being funneled through departments of transportation, I believe. And then there's competitive funds. So states and private entities will come together and apply for that funding. So it's really exciting. I think it's an awesome opportunity for the Midwest to come together and win some really big projects for the region in general. And it'll be really exciting to get more details in the next few months on those opportunities. We have a few minutes left, so if you have more questions, feel free to submit them. I'd like to throw you guys kind of a big question, and I'm going to steal this from our friend Kristen Jilks with Customers First. She always asks, if you had all the power, what would you do? Huge opportunities right now. What do you think is kind of the biggest opportunity at hand, and what needs to happen to take advantage of it? I know it's a big one.
I mean, I think the biggest opportunity is really to accelerate transportation electrification, right? I think that's what this is going to do. I think the transportation sector is clearly on a trajectory to electrify. All of the major automakers are moving in that direction. A lot of folks kind of see the writing on the wall there, and the real opportunity is to make that occur faster. And I think, we haven't talked a lot about the specific barriers to that, but range anxiety and lack of availability of public charging infrastructure is an enormous barrier to EV adoption. And so this opportunity to really build out this comprehensive national charging infrastructure network, give everyone the confidence that they need to go electric with their transportation needs. I mean, I think that's just fantastic, right? Because the bill itself really gives everyone the opportunity to orient around the same goal, which I think everyone was, lots of folks were kind of doing on their own and in their own worlds and the parts of the world that they control. And so this really creates that opportunity for broader collaboration to work towards that big picture goal, which is really what we need to kind of get over that hump of that range anxiety barrier.
Yeah, and personally, I think electric vehicles are really important to electrifying the transportation sector, but so is public transportation. And I would be really excited to see more investment in public transportation in the way that people move, and in infrastructure for people in rural communities to commute to urban communities for work. And all different types of public transportation infrastructure are really paramount to reducing emissions in the transportation sector overall, although electric vehicles are extremely important. Not everyone has access to them. I think increasing accessibility to electric vehicles and affordability is really key. And then, like I said, as well as investing in public transportation.
Yeah, thanks for that. As someone who grew up in Detroit, I'm used to talking about the automotive industry, and I've been really trying to reframe from automotive to mobility. It's not just about cars, it's about getting people where they need to be and getting goods where they need to be. And that's one of the most exciting things that I've seen over the past few years is really that shift from electric transportation just being about passenger vehicles to, there are Class 8 semi trucks that are all electric on the road right now. That's wild. And it's such a huge opportunity to improve air quality, and just, make our whole transportation system better. It's pretty cool. We have just a few minutes left. Did either of you have any parting thoughts for the group on collaboration, your vision for electric transportation in the Midwest?
I just want to encourage people again to reach out, to make a connection or make a comment. Like I said in my presentation, the government works for you. So we're really eager to hear everyone's thoughts and ideas and what they think should be prioritized in Wisconsin's clean energy plan and our transition to a clean energy economy overall.
Yeah, I'll just say again, talk to your utility. If you're an Xcel Energy customer, talk to me. We want to work together, and we want to help everybody achieve these goals.
Yeah, same here. So you have tons of resources in the room. I'm willing to hang out and chat after this. I'm sure our panelists are too. Send us an email, check out our websites. Lots and lots of exciting opportunities coming up, from utility collaborations on charging corridors to federal infrastructure funding and everything in between. So thanks so much for being here. We really appreciate it. And we hope that you enjoy the rest of the afternoon.